Billionaires are fleeing California. The truth behind that Texas man who shot his daughter. And the Epstein files exonerate Trump. Sort of. That and more on this week's America Uncovered headlines. Welcome to America Uncovered. I'm Chris Chappell. Buckle up, folks, because it's time to talk about the biggest story in all the news right now. The one that most impacts the present and especially the future of all Americans. And no, I'm not talking about President Trump thinking about striking Iran, a move that could spiral into a full-blown conflict. Or how Trump's border czar, Tom Homan, has announced an end to the Minnesota ICE surge, causing various Minnesota Democrats to basically declare victory over the federal government. And I'm not talking about how sealed Watergate files shows the U.S. military spied on and plotted against Richard Nixon while he was president, helping lead to his downfall. I'd say you should read the article about that by the New York Times, but I assume many won't because Gen Z is the first generation to ever show a lower IQ than the previous. But I'm not talking about that either. Get serious. I'm talking about the real issues here, something with much more dire consequences. Specifically, did Kid Rock lip sync his performance at the Turning Point USA halftime show? Mr. Rock denies this, saying it was a syncing issue of the video to the audio on the taped show. Though he didn't deny the allegations that with that sleeveless fur coat and jorts, he looked like if John Cena was a broke pimp. And then we have to talk about the other halftime show. Republican Congressman Andy Ogles is calling for a formal congressional inquiry into the NFL and NBC over Bad Bunny's Super Bowl show. I get that it was a controversial decision to perform the halftime show of America's game in Spanish, but is that really necessary? Oh, what's that, Shelley? Oh no, it's not because the show was in Spanish. Ogles, who looks like if Shooter McGavin was more into politics than putting, claims the performance was sexually explicit and indecent. And Ogles would know since his last name is what you call it when a guy stares at a woman and screams, "Awooga!" And in case you're wondering, yes, this is what Republican virtue signaling looks like. Then again, maybe he's just trying to find all the Easter eggs in Bad Bunny's Super Bowl performance. Yes, there were tons of Easter eggs. So does that make him a bad Easter Bunny? Maybe a probe is necessary. Hopefully we can get to the bottom of these halftime controversies, which are frankly the only stories anyone should be talking about. This is what matters, and definitely not how our emotions are being manipulated by foreign bots who are helping push chuds like Nick Fuentes. Speaking of robots and chuds, Mark Zuckerberg, the Meta CEO, is the latest California billionaire to relocate to Florida amid tax concerns. Man, that humidity is going to be murder on his circuit board. What are those tax concerns? Well, the 2026 Billionaire Tax Act, a proposed one-time 5% state tax on the net worth of billionaires living in California. This proposal has naturally caused a lot of stress for, you guessed it, California Governor Gavin Newsom. He's stuck between a rock and a hard place. Specifically this rock, if old Dwayne is worth $1 billion. On the one hand, he's been touting himself as a progressive, possible future candidate for president, and doesn't get much more progressive than a billionaire tax. On the other hand, economists predict this billionaire tax would be disastrous and cause the wealthy to flee, taking their wealth and possibly business elsewhere. Zuckertron 3000 shows it's already begun. Newsom has criticized this wealth tax and is trying to stop it from happening. He says that if billionaires flee to avoid this tax, California won't make that additional money and will lose the taxes the billionaires were already paying, which will lead to fewer resources to fund social services, which would be a disaster, assuming the billionaires leaving weren't ones that didn't use a million loopholes to barely pay any taxes. And assuming California was the type of state that knew how to properly spend taxpayer money. Hi there, $1.7 million public toilet. Either way, it's easy to understand why Newsom is against this tax. However, if it goes to vote and California citizens elect to force billionaires to pay up, would Newsom veto it? Shutting down the will of the people isn't exactly good optics when your entire 2028 presidential strategy is criticizing Trump for shutting down the will of the people. Then again, that would be just another strategy he'd be stealing from Trump's playbook, so maybe that's his own version of a 4D galaxy brain chess move. Though Trump playing 5D chess is stealing a move from Biden's playbook.
And I'm proud to officially name the undisputed, when did this come out?
Why is Trump stealing Biden's signature gibberish? I don't know. I don't even enjoy playing 2D chess. But speaking of Democratic governors, the National Governors Association canceled its annual White House meeting after Trump excluded Democrats and only invited Republican governors. The meeting is traditionally a bipartisan gathering where leaders can reach across the aisle and find common ground, but apparently not this year. 18 Democratic governors came out and said that because of this snub, they wouldn't attend a White House dinner this year. Yes, that's right. They won't attend something they likely also weren't going to be invited to. Brilliant strategy. Can't imagine why Democratic voters are disappointed in their leaders and don't think they fight hard enough. You may have seen the story about the Texas dad, originally from Britain, who shot and killed his daughter while she was visiting after they argued about Donald Trump. Many are framing this as the father intentionally shooting his daughter because he was so enraged about his daughter criticizing the president. However, shockingly, that's not the whole story. I know, misconceptions spreading online. What a novelty. While the father, Chris Harrison, did shoot and kill his daughter Lucy after they had a heated argument about Trump, that doesn't appear to be the reason he shot and killed her. Chris Harrison is a recovering alcoholic and was allegedly drunk at the time. He claims he showed off his gun to Lucy, pointing at her without checking if it was loaded. So it seems like less an act of political aggression and more one of careless, poor gun ownership. Either that or he's a massive fan of Kristi Noem. Harrison wasn't charged for the death of his daughter, and many took that as, in Texas, it's legal to murder anyone who doesn't like Donald Trump. But that doesn't seem to be what happened. So why wasn't he charged? Texas gonna Texas sometimes. This is a tragic story and a reminder to be a responsible gun owner, or gun poser. Speaking of reckless endangerment, or unendangerment, President Trump and the EPA administrator have revoked the 2009 quote-unquote endangerment finding on greenhouse gases, which, if you ask Trump, is the single largest deregulatory action in American history. And if you ask some in the mainstream media, it's, oh dear God, the end is nigh. The endangerment finding was an EPA proclamation that 6 key greenhouse gases, including carbon dioxide and methane, were quote-unquote air pollution under the Clean Air Act of 1963 and pose a threat to public health. Carbon dioxide. Guess we'd all better stop exhaling then. The finding has been used as the basis for a lot of the climate change regulations coming out of the federal government. So the mainstream media isn't wrong when they say this move will hurt federal climate change regulations, but it's worth mentioning that a lot of climate change regulations are on the state level now anyway. And even red states have regulations to protect their air, water, and soil from pollution, even if it isn't about climate change for them. Yes, those are windmills in Texas. So is this really the end of the world as we know it? Well, I guess only time will tell. But hey, how about some good news? The FBI concluded that Jeffrey Epstein wasn't running a sex trafficking ring for powerful men. Whew, that's a load off my mind. Turns out we were all worried over nothing. Well, that's going to wrap up this week's episode of America. Oh, what's that, Shelley? Really? You don't say. It's just come to my attention that apparently a lot of people don't trust the FBI. And that includes U.S. lawmakers who are accusing the Justice Department of inappropriately redacting Epstein files to hide potential abusers instead of victims. The FBI says they reached their conclusion because, among other reasons, they couldn't find more than one victim claiming they were trafficked. They must not have been looking very hard because during a public hearing involving Attorney General Pam Bondi, several Epstein survivors all claimed they haven't been given a chance to meet with Bondi's DOJ. Which makes sense. I mean, when trying to find out if people were victimized, it's not like you need to talk to people who were victimized or anything. Revelations in the Epstein files have toppled top figures in Europe, such as a Norwegian ambassador, a Slovakian security advisor, and of course, the Andrew, formerly known as Prince. And it's even caused a major headache for the British Prime Minister. Meanwhile, here in the U.S., members of Congress have been given access to unredacted Epstein files, and they're dropping details.
Congressman Massey and I went to the Department of Justice to read the unredacted Epstein files. 70 to 80% of the files are still redacted. In fact, there were 6 wealthy, powerful men that the DOJ hid for no apparent reason. When Congressman Massey and I pointed this out to the Department of Justice. They acknowledged their mistake, and now they have revealed the identity of these 6 powerful men.
Wow, that's pretty salacious. Too bad we're not going to get to know who these men are, as they would never just kind of announce that sort of thing.
These men are Salvatore Navora, Zorab Mikoladze, Leopig Leonor, Nicola Caputa, Sultan Ahmed bin Sulayem, CEO of Dubai Ports World, and billionaire businessman Leslie Wexner.
Wow, is someone squeezing oranges? Because it's getting juicy in here. I'd like to take this opportunity to congratulate conspiracy theorists. I know how long you've been waiting for this day. This must feel like being a Chicago Cubs fan when they finally won the World Series, but without having to celebrate by eating the worst dogs on the planet. Wexner's name was mentioned over 4,000 times in the files. At her hearing, AG Pam Bondi said his name being redacted this one time was a simple mistake. Though it is a bit coincidental, this redaction of his name was where he was listed as a co-conspirator of Epstein's. Yep, definitely just a coincidence. House Judiciary Ranking Member Jamie Raskin accused the DOJ of a cover-up, calling them out for releasing the names of a lot of victims, which is either spectacular incompetence and sloppiness on their part, or, as a lot of the survivors believe, a deliberate threat to other survivors who are thinking about coming forward that they need to be careful because they can be exposed and have their personal information dragged through the mud as well. While a cover-up seems possible, it is hard to overlook the very real and plausible explanation of spectacular incompetence and sloppiness. That has Kash Patel and Pam Bondi written all over it, and the writing is then hastily redacted. One person not incriminated, though, is President Trump. If anything, he's exonerated. Files show Trump called the police about Epstein in 2006 and said Ghislaine Maxwell was evil. But this isn't new information. I've covered how lawyers for Epstein's victims claimed Trump was instrumental in convicting Epstein in 2008. So why does the left insist on calling him a PDF file? Well, like the DOJ, it could be a case of dishonesty versus incompetence, or por qué no los dos? But there is the issue that if Trump had no part in Epstein's sex trafficking ring that totally didn't exist, thanks FBI, then why has Trump been so weird about the files being released? One theory is that he isn't trying to save himself, but save associates. Les Wexner is a major donor to Republican candidates. And Sultan Ahmed bin Sulayem is a businessman from the UAE, a country that, the Wall Street Journal reports, invested $500 million into Trump's family's crypto company. Is that why Trump and his DOJ are trying to block the release of Epstein's co-conspirators? Not to save himself, but to save his human piggy banks? Who knows? But it is worth mentioning that a nation is accused of seemingly engaging in a pay-to-play scheme with the President of the United States, and that might be worth talking about only after we get to the bottom of these halftime show scandals. That's what really matters. But what do you think? Leave your comments below with that American flag emoji to show YouTube that we've got engagement. And please, if you want more America Uncovered, I need your help. Subscribe to my exclusive censorship-free website, AmericaUncovered.tv. Just click this button or the link down below. There's been a huge outpouring of support, so I think we can turn things around. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. Thank you for watching America Uncovered.